Hello everyone, I am Jmulls, and World of Warcraft has always been synonymous with PC gaming, but it's becoming an ever more popular theory that World of Warcraft may soon be coming to consoles. And in this video I want to talk about why I think that's an inevitability, what Blizzard and World of Warcraft are actively doing to prepare for that, and why I think it's a good idea. Well, let's start with what Blizzard are doing to prepare for an eventual console port of World of Warcraft. They are making a lot of changes to the functionality of the user interface in World of Warcraft, namely, enacting a plan to integrate a lot of functionality that we have currently with add-ons in combat, like weak auras, like details, like nameplates, stuff like that. They want to incorporate that functionality, or at least some version of that functionality, into the base UI of World of Warcraft natively, and then once they are in a position where they believe they've brought everything online when it comes to what do people normally use an add-on for combat in World of Warcraft, they want to shut off the ability for add-ons to really be able to aid you in combat. You can still use add-ons for like cosmetic purposes and just overall customization or for non-combat instances. What they're trying to rein in is how prevalent and synonymous modern World of Warcraft is with third-party add-ons like weak auras, like details, like Plata, stuff like that. I think it's overall a good idea in theory. It depends on the execution and if Blizzard's replacements for a lot of these add-ons are actually up to par. I talk about it more in this video, but also Ian Hazzikostas goes into detail in an interview with PC Gamer that the core design of combat in World of Warcraft would also have to change to be way more visually clear and to possibly give players more time to react without the tools of, say, weak auras calculating essentially what you should do. There's a lot of varying opinions on this. Overall, I like this idea in theory. It really does depend on the execution, but it also makes sense if World of Warcraft is aiming to come to console. Because, yeah, you can mod console games. It's not as seamless, intuitive, or baked into the overall ecosystem like modifying PC games on the PC platform is, especially when it concerns games like World of Warcraft. There are other MMORPGs on console, Final Fantasy XIV being a popular example of this. And with the massive advantages that add-ons give you in World of Warcraft, you wouldn't want players to feel as if they are tethered to a giant boulder simply because of the platform they're playing on. If you're trying to populate an entire new platform with players for your game, you don't want the tagline being, play this, it's a worse version and you'll be worse in a multiplayer game compared to other people on PC. That's just not a good feeling. That will be a put off for a lot of people. You don't want people in Group Finder essentially saying, no console players allowed, because they wouldn't have access to things like weak auras or something like that. Or at least in the same way as on PC. You could make the argument they should just like bring on these add-on developers and create a client for the console version to allow add-ons and to allow the update of add-ons. I can just imagine the back-end nightmare that would become though, and I think the direction they're going for here is probably the smarter one. It also probably leads to a more healthy game environment. Like, let's face it, World of Warcraft is not exactly the easiest game to get into when there's such a large barrier to entry, because you just have to understand all this terminology, all of this essentially brain rot that has been baked into the World of Warcraft experience for over 20 years at this point, especially when it concerns third-party modifications to the game. Some people will take to that like a cow to grass. A lot of other people, though, will just look at, oh, so I have to play the game, right? But then I have to download all these add-ons? I'm out. Dude, what's a weak aura? Dude, what's a Plata? How am I customizing this? Why does the UI look so different? I'm not doing this. I'll go play something else. Ever since Dragonflight, it's been abundantly apparent that World of Warcraft is starting to design its game for the long term instead of just 1 or 2 expansions out. And I think they're trying to shift and augment the game in such a way over time to put itself in a better situation to better support itself over the next, say, 10 to 20 years. And if you want the game to grow and to expand and to also reach new demographics and markets, a console port or console ports make a lot of sense to me. And while yeah, it would involve some modifications to the overall experience of World of Warcraft currently, I think those modifications when it concerns the add-on stuff are probably for the best, because I wouldn't argue that the prevalence of things like weak auras, like Plata, and all these combat-centric add-ons are healthy for the game and for the game state, are healthy when it concerns recruiting new players to the game. I also don't like that it gives Blizzard the out as to why the UI may not be up to snuff. They've made changes over the last couple of years to improve it. They can still go a decent way further, and that's seemingly what they're aiming for, but you can understand why pessimism still sprouts up in regards to this issue, with how buggy or broken new features can still be with each new patch. Stuff like the cooldown manager, stuff like that. But also with 11.1.7, they're introducing 2 new features baked into the game. Again, inspired by add-ons, directly so, like Akili, a rotation helper, and a 1-button combat rotation. The rotation helper essentially just tells you, the player, what you should probably press next, and the 1-button rotation, well, kinda is what you expect it to be. Though apparently it doesn't actually press big cooldowns to interrupt the stuff like that, it just goes through your actual damage rotation. The rest of your kit is still up to you. But again, this is functionality that in my eyes is directly trying to appeal to people that are either newer, don't know what they're doing and want a little bit of in-game help, or also possibly appealing to people who would want to play on a controller and either want to get used to how that feels or have a good way to reduce the amount of buttons needed to press in order to play a World of Warcraft class. It's not like no one would use controller if that functionality came on baseline in World of Warcraft. I'm sure there is add-on functionality already existing for World of Warcraft if you want to use a controller, but if that functionality was baked baseline into the game, because there are console versions on the way for World of Warcraft, if that does happen, I could see this functionality really benefiting from things like Rotation Helper or the 1-button rotation button. But let's talk about now, why does Blizzard want to do this? Again, theoretically, they haven't actually talked about this to my knowledge, but theoretically, why would Blizzard want to make console ports of World of Warcraft so late into the game? I mean, it's been over 20 years since the game came out. Well, again, going back to what we were just talking about when it comes to them looking farther into the future for World of Warcraft than arguably ever before, and making a lot of long-term focus changes to the game and the game state, they probably want to appeal not only to old players whose attention has lapsed when it comes to World of Warcraft, but also probably to new players as well. And by giving people as easy an on-ramp as humanly possible to get them into the experience of World of Warcraft, to be able to play on whatever platform they have available to them, you're opening yourself up to more players being willing to try out your game, and for more people to not be bounced off when they're inundated with people telling them, download a weak aura pack, download Plata, download details, on top of learn how your class works, how your spec works, how your hero talents work, on top of how gems work, on top of how etc, etc, etc. Like, that is a lot, and I don't think people that understand World of Warcraft, that have played this game for a while, truly understand how off-putting all that is for a lot of people that want to get into the game, want to get into the experience. I think Blizzard, at the end of it all, still has to walk a very fine line, because you don't want to go the route where you ostracize all of your core player base, the people that have stuck with you, the people that currently love your game and form the majority of your fan base. You don't want to ostracize them just to appeal to new players who may or may not want to get into the game to begin with. I think the goal here should be to retain the feel of World of Warcraft, the gameplay of World of Warcraft, but to rein in that design bloat that comes with add-ons. Open up that gameplay experience, that core loop, to as many people as you possibly can without completely compromising that base experience. And we've been talking about this a lot recently when it concerns World of Warcraft. I think what they're saying is good. It sounds logical. It sounds smart. Hey, we don't want the game to be so reliant on third-party add-ons to be able to play it properly or at a decent rate, or without feeling as if you're significantly holding yourself back by not utilizing these add-ons. We don't want the game to feel like that anymore. It is wholly off-putting for a lot of people. We want to bake in some of that functionality baseline while also changing the design of a lot of our encounters to correspond to the information that we will end up providing you when it comes to our replacements for a lot of these add-ons. The goal should be for the game to be more fun out of the end of this than it was going into it. But time and time and time again, the quality provided by Blizzard hasn't lived up to exactly what they've said. Or they've had to walk back things like time gating the rewards of horrific visions. The controversies that surrounded Cersei's circlet with the Siren Isle, how buggy and laggy the Nightfall campaign was. If you want people to get excited for what you are speaking, for what you are saying, for your goals, your ideas, you have to have that inherent trust in the player base that they believe they will see what you are saying. Now, when do I think we'll end up seeing this? Well, it's really hard to tell, but I think there's a couple of scenarios that make the most sense to me. Namely 3. And they're gonna be kind of obvious, right? Like, I'm not being overly precise here, but I think sometime in midnight would make a lot of sense, especially with the rate that they're adding this quote-unquote add-on functionality to the baseline experience to World of Warcraft. We had the cooldown manager in 11.1.5, and we're going to have the rotation helper in 11.1.7 alongside the one-button rotation. This add-on functionality is seemingly being added to the game rather quickly, so sometime in midnight, when they've made all those changes and they announce, hey guys, we're bringing the game to consoles, experience the World Soul Saga, prepare for the Last Titan. So the console version comes out, and you have access to the War Within and Midnight, so the console player base would be able to be on the bandwagon and the hype train going into the final chapter of the World Soul Saga, that being the Last Titan. That timing makes sense to me. The other timing is the actual launch of the Last Titan. So you have people saying, hey, if you've been on console and you want to jump into World of Warcraft, here's an entire story, beginning, middle, and end. Here's the War Within, here's Midnight, and here's the Last Titan. Welcome to World of Warcraft. The other thing that makes sense to me is the expansion after the Last Titan. I did say I'm not going to be overly precise here, people, but like releasing it either at the tail end of the Last Titan or with the expansion after the Last Titan makes a lot of sense to me, because it really does feel as if they're building for something big after the World Soul Saga. Like some big transition. You can call it World of Warcraft 2, WoW 2, whatever. Some big reset for the game, maybe a new engine. Maybe we're just overthinking it. But honestly, I think earlier rather than later makes the most sense, because with World of Warcraft being under Blizzard, which is now under Microsoft, you would imagine they would want that game to be on Xbox. And let's be fair here, probably also PlayStation at this point. Maybe even Switch too. You would want to be able to tap into those player bases and make money from them as soon as you humanly can. So to me, the most likely is probably sometime late midnight or early Last Titan, when housing is online and has had a bit of time to get the kinks worked out of it, to be iterated on somewhat, for them to fully be out of the combat add-on era for World of Warcraft, to also fuel the hype train that will be the Last Titan. That makes the most sense to me. As a company, I can't imagine you want to leave massive amounts of money on the table for no reason at all. And maybe that's honestly why they're trying to bring this add-on functionality into the baseline experience of World of Warcraft as quickly as they are. To try and do this as quickly as possible, to put the game in a state for a console version as quickly as possible. That makes a lot of sense to me. Obviously, if any of this is going to work, well, the stuff they add into the game baseline has to work, has to be functional. Don't just be the barest bones version of weak auras, or Hikili, or details, etc., etc. It has to be clear, customizable, the game has an edit mode, utilize that, and it has to work. Because in my opinion, when this functionality is announced, the sentiment should be, oh cool, look what they're adding to the game. It shouldn't just be, oh cool, how is this gonna be broken 5 different ways every week? And I think with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and help support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody, until we meet again.